All right, all right. Happy Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Lee Camp. He's a comedian and a political commentator. He hosts a show called Dangerous Ideas with Lee Camp. Welcome back, Lee.
What's up, Sabby? Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming back on. I see. Are you at tour right now? Are you still doing a comedy tour?
No, we just did one show in LA, but that was a lot of fun, but no.
Okay. So one of the things I want to start off talking about this tweet that you had here for people who have not seen this. You said they now tell us that the cop who killed Sonia Massie because he felt threatened by some water had a long history of issues. On one hand, this is not surprising because we see again and again that the U.S. police departments never actually fire problematic cops. They just move them around and force them to take a class on not being brutal morons in a system that specifically hires brutal morons. I want to talk a little bit about that. For those who are not aware, there is more information that has been released about the Sonia Massie situation, more so about the officer in question. That officer, obviously, as you guys know, he's facing multiple charges in reference to that incident. But also now there are reports coming out, like Lee said, that police officer has been problematic for quite some time. So I want to talk a little bit about that, Lee. This just seems like a recurring theme.
Yeah, so we see this every few months or maybe every few years where a police officer horrifically murders an innocent person, usually for a ridiculous reason. With Eric Garner, it was selling cigarettes illegally. With George Floyd, it was supposedly a bad check that he bounced. With Sonia Massie, it's that she picked up a pot of water and said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." And then they're executed by our police. Now, when these things go viral, the police have a kind of standard PR practice, and one of them is to say, "Oh, that bad apple, man." With Eric Garner, the guy had used that illegal chokehold many times before. We later found out with Chauvin, he also had used the kneeling on the neck thing many times before. And they say, "Oh, that bad apple, man, if we had just gotten rid of that bad apple." When in fact, this is how our police work. If you actually look at the totality of the system, they murder 1,200 people a year average. If you go by their numbers, if you look at the Lancet Medical Journal, which said that over half of all cop killings are actually not written down as cop killings. It's just written down as heart attack or, lack of air or whatever they put down. So it's actually double that. It's probably more like 2,400 or more a year of innocent people murdered by police. You compare that to other nations, and there's places like Switzerland where the average is 0 or 1 person killed a year. Iceland has murdered 1 person in their entire existence as a country. It's just an insanely brutal and insanely set up, just the entirety of the system. And yet we're told, "Oh no, it's this bad apple. This guy is he unhinged. We get him put away and everything's fine." And it is not looking at the heart of the system. It's a distraction to get you and me and so many of us to stop talking about how U.S. policing actually works, which, was based on slave patrols initially and is one of the most, fascist and all-encompassing police forces, the 3rd largest police army in the world, second only to India and China, which are far bigger populations. So it really is designed to get us not to talk about the reality.
That's right. And I don't know if everyone has seen this because everyone's not on Twitter, but there have been a number of videos from fellow police officers that have condemned what Grayson did. Other police officers making their own videos saying, no, this was 100% a murder, speaking out against that. But they don't speak out against the system because they're a part of it.
Yeah, they're a part of it, and they're defending the system by saying, "Oh, we would never behave that way." But to look at U.S. policing in general, if you actually study it, you find that it is set up in such a way where it's really designed to go after the poor, or poorer communities, both in terms of where police are located. They're going to be located in poorer communities. And no, the general amount of crime is not just in poorer communities. The rich are involved in all kinds of crimes, all kinds of wonderful and dirty crimes, from stealing from all of us to using drugs. Oh my God, rich use drugs? Yeah, that's right. They do. Just like a lot of people in America use a certain amount of drugs. But we, for one thing, the rich are not investigated. So you're not going to have a police officer, walking through Wall Street trying to catch someone with cocaine in their pocket in general. So they're not investigated. But then if the rich are caught with some cocaine, guess what? It's a slap on the wrist at worst. Normally the cop would be like, you know what, just don't have that out here and get out of here. So we have an entire system set up to mainly go after the poor, those who are already having a tough time in life. And if you look at the Sonia Massie story as an example, she calls the cops because she thinks there's a prowler around. And they show up and they notice, I wasn't sure whether it was a broken open window or a cracked window on her car. And rather than knock on her door and say, we don't see a prowler, good night, which is what they do with a rich person who called them. They go, we don't see a prowler, but your window's cracked. We want to come in. We want to investigate your life. We kind of want to look around your apartment. We want to see what's up with you. And it is just completely the opposite than the way they would behave in a gated community where they're like, hey, no prowler. Have a good night, madam. Like, it's just, and so that's how you end up in these situations.
Yeah, so people have to understand this too, because wealthy people, they do have the money and the resources and the network to get themselves out of these situations. This is why a lot of times, for the most part, you see wealthy people don't go to jail. Now, there have been some exceptions, but most of the time they have a way to get out of it. They have the money to, number one, pay bail, pay cash bail.
We're one of two countries in the world that has the cash bail system.
Right. Because, guys, some people that are in jail, it's not necessarily because they're guilty. Some of them are there because they can't afford to pay cash bail. So they're just stuck there. Right. So that's kind of how like the system works. But to Lee's point, what people have to understand, if you are someone that is pro-police, what you have to get is that the police are targeting poor and working class people. They don't target the wealthy. This is why you always see people that commit like these Wall Street crimes. They manage to get away with it. Nobody was jailed for the 2008 housing crisis. Yeah. Not one banker, not one. And there's a whole documentary about this called The Con. If you guys haven't seen it, watch it. But the whole documentary, it names the different bankers that were, should have been held accountable. And none of them were jailed. None of them were held accountable. So again, like I said, they have the money and the resources to get away from the system.
And with 2008 and the collapse, people yell, Bernie Madoff. And first of all, exception that proves the rule. If you can name one dude that they caught and locked up over all of the egregious things that Wall Street has done to you and me and all of us, over all the theft, over all the exploitation, over all the abuse, you were able to name one guy, then the exception that proves the rule that they don't go after these guys. But then on top of that, Bernie Madoff was locked up because he stole from, wait for it, other rich people. That's when it gets a little more complicated.
That's right. I mean, this is one of the things I just continue to point out, number one, as well. She had a pot of water, which I watched that video in slow motion, and you'll see that she had already put the pot down and put her hands up, and she crouched down before he shot her. So the whole thing about the pot of water, that doesn't even work if you watch it in slow motion. So there's that. Meanwhile, if you go back to the Trump rally, here is a shooter on the roof with a gun. A police officer climbs up the ladder, sees him with the gun, and retreats.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell. I mean, many people, including me, have asked what the hell was going on with the Trump rally, where they just let a shooter sit on a roof and aim at the president, the former president. And there's plenty of theories on what the hell is going on there, but who knows?
Now that brings me to the Kamala Harris situation. Because for all the people, and JB had such a good point about this, for all the people that immediately just hopped on the Kamala Harris train and they said, yay, everything's going to be great and safe now. She was a cop. And Kamala Harris, I can see her also choosing to give more money to the police, just like Joe Biden did. I don't think that's going to be any different just because she made a statement condemning what happened to Sonia Massie. I still see her giving more money to the police. Remember, she was known as being tough on, that was her thing as a prosecutor in California. She was known as being tough on crime. So what do you say to people that think or assume that Kamala Harris is going to fix this criminal justice issue?
I would ask them what they're smoking, because I'd like some. If they can send it to me, I'll include my address in the link here. No, it's laughable that she'll probably give more to the cops, but she's certainly not going to decrease the budget of the policing across America. She has proven throughout her career that she is part and parcel of this system. She defends this system. She is this system. She called herself the top cop of California, which, if you were to look at its economy in terms of nations, it's the 5th or 6th largest nation in the world. And she was the top cop of that. But she wasn't, she was bizarrely worse than your average top cop in a state, wanting to imprison parents because their kids miss school, refusing to release nonviolent prisoners in California because they needed the labor, because the forced labor slavery goes on in our prison colonies across this nation, which, if I need to remind anyone, is the largest prison state in the world. Funny we don't hear that in the Star-Spangled Banner. Largest prison state, both per capita and per sheer number in the world, and it's the land of the free. But she has proven herself time and time again to be part and parcel of the cops, of the policing system in this country, and she will not change that at all. And of course, Joe Biden was the same. Joe Biden, throughout his career, not just as president, throughout his career, was the front and center of every policing bill, every bill that gave more money to cops, every bill that gave more surveillance to cops. Joe Biden was the face of it. Kamala, of course, has been his vice president, which means she's part of it as well. And yeah, she will absolutely just facilitate this horrific fascist police state the way it is. And, her condemning what happened to Sonia Massie, again, this is performative stuff that is done whenever one of these murders goes viral, which is very rare. And in this case, most of the time it's because someone else was filming, someone with a cell phone filmed the murder of someone, and then that goes viral. In this case, it was the body cam, but the body cam system, if you look at it as a whole, it is incredibly rare that body cam video that shows the cops doing bad, doing wrong, comes out in a timely manner. Almost never does it come out in a timely manner. Body cams are designed to surveil all of us, to actually facilitate police brutality, manipulation, injustice. And in this rare occasion, probably because someone on the top of this system in whatever city this was, wanted it to come out, but it's very rare. Generally, they hide the footage, they cover it up for years afterwards. So most of the time these murders go viral, it's because someone else filmed it.
If you can answer this question from Skylar here, I'm not a Kamala fan at all, but when does she keep California inmates in prison longer to maintain free prison labor leave?
So there was a time where, California prisons are notoriously over capacity, horrifically, people sleeping 5 and 10 to a room or whatever. And there was a time where they had, the government in California had said, we need to release some of these prisoners, the nonviolent ones, the ones serving way longer than they should, in my opinion. And her office fought against it. Now, she, I think, has made statements saying, oh, that was, my office, that wasn't me. But to me, when someone says that, I just hear bullshit. So, yeah.
Yeah. Not only that, too, but originally, this is another thing I think a lot of people are not aware of. Originally, she was against police reforms, which included body cams, by the way.
Yeah, the body cams issue, I've only started researching this recently because some great work that's been done. I can't remember the name of the guy, Alec, something like Kakanakis. But anyway, he's done some research overall on the entirety of body cams. And although it's called police reform, it's actually been pushed by a lot of police departments because they want the surveillance. It's a camera pointed out at you and me. It they can, most states, they can turn it off if they want to do something truly illegal. But on top of that, even if they do something illegal, it generally, the footage is held by the police and the higher ups in that state. So they're curating who sees what. So it really is largely a surveillance tactic, and yet it's been pushed as a liberal reform. And when you look at the entirety of what body cams have achieved, nothing that you or I would want. There's been no decrease in violence amongst police. There's been no increase in accountability. And the Sonia Massie example is the exception that proves the rule. They're murdering 2,400 a year, and we see one by the body cam. So it's incredibly rare.
That's right. And another thing, too, that I want to add, because now, of course, the liberal media, they're saying not to focus on her record or making excuses for it. No, you have to focus on her record the same way you focus on any other candidate's record. I think that's very important for people. But also, there's this big elephant in the room, which you did highlight, which I feel like a lot of people are not calling out. The mainstream media, you tweeted this, the mainstream media is announcing with 0 votes cast that Kamala Harris will be the Democratic nominee for president. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm excited, sarcastically here. Think about what this will mean for America if Kamala Harris wins. So here's the thing. A lot of people aren't even talking about the fact that no one voted for her, Lee. Not one person. And I told people about this before because I've interviewed the Becks. They were the lawyers that were part of the DNC fraud lawsuit. And they told me, they warned about this. They tried to tell people, even if you look at the election right now, they said the DNC legally, and this was decided by a judge, they can pick the nominee. There's nothing you can do about it because it's a corporation. And you would think more Americans will wake up to this and say, wait a minute, did I vote for Kamala Harris? Did anybody vote for her? No, but people are just like, yay, I'm so excited. Yay. I'm like, do you guys realize what is happening? They handpicked a person for you. And what's wild is that even Barack Obama wanted an open nomination, an open primary. So what does that tell you guys?
Yeah, and hilariously, like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and these others who run the Democratic elites, they came forward after, it was about 2 days, maybe 3, after Biden said he was stepping aside, and they had a press conference, and Chuck Schumer said, Kamala Harris said she wanted to earn this nomination by a grassroots effort, bottom up instead of top down. And Chuck Schumer goes, and now that she's done that, we're excited to endorse. And I was like, done that? Done what? There's been not a single vote from anyone across America putting her in as the Democratic nominee. And for those keeping score at home, in case you're, playing your Democratic rigged primary bingo, this is the third election in a row that the DNC has rigged in one way or another in order to put someone in who was not winning the Democratic nomination. Third in a row, 2016, 2020, and now here.
That's right. And the other thing too, I think, some people think for whatever reason that she should be the one because she is the vice president. And they're like, well, at least she's not Joe Biden and she's younger than him and that kind of thing. But nobody's sitting here thinking about what this really means. So I thought it was funny that you said this part here. You said, finally, a woman will be the face of genocide. Finally, a female will be the one deciding to drop bombs on children on a daily basis. Think of how far this country has come. And that's the other thing, too. There are a number of people that I've seen online, in person, by the way. Only one person has told me in person that they're voting for Kamala Harris. Nobody else has said that. Most people have told me that they're not voting at all. That's just the reality. If you talk to people on the street and you get offline or you stop watching like corporate media and what they're telling you with these focus groups that they put together, because it's not like, everyday people. But the thing is like the people online that are like, I just want a woman president. I'm like, guys, didn't we go through this in 2016 with Hillary Clinton where people were like, I'm with her? I've seen pictures online of Kamala Harris with that same phrase, I'm with her. And I feel like nobody's really learned anything from 2016. If the only reason you're going to vote for someone is because they're a female, what is wrong with you?
Right. It's, this is what the American empire has vomited up in order to try and sustain hegemony, while everyone is looking around going, wow, I see genocide being committed by Israel. It's U.S. backed. These are U.S. bombs. The Biden administration ships missiles to Israel to bomb children every 36 hours during this entire 9 months of genocide. And people look around and they go, well, the answer is if you put a female face, if you put a black face, if you on these disgusting actions, then it somehow fixes them. No, I would love to have a black female running this country if they had different policies than the absolutely horrific white men that have come before them. That's kind of part of the key, is to have different policies. And instead, she stands for all the same shit. It really is no different in terms of what she supports. She supports this genocide being committed by Israel. She has received more AIPAC money than almost anyone else. She supports the proxy war in Ukraine. There is really no difference in terms of her policies. And she'll say things like, we've got to worry about the children in Gaza or something like that, which are, this is just words that are, Biden said the same thing, or Biden's spokespeople have said the same thing. Oh, we got, it's too many children dying in Gaza. They won't say we're not going to ship the missiles to murder those children. They just say, oh, there's too many children dying in Gaza. It's words versus actions. It's words versus policies. And there is nothing about Kamala Harris that has shown that she's against U.S. genocide, against U.S. hegemony, against the proxy war in Ukraine, against any of this corporate destruction of the world. And none of this is meant to be positive speech about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is just a slightly different shade of color, more orange, of the utter destruction of the world by the U.S. empire. So me criticizing Kamala Harris as being the, hey, female face of genocide is not to say Donald Trump's any different. They both of them put us on the cusp of nuclear annihilation. I mean, it's tough to even come to terms with how close to possible nuclear oblivion we've been with this proxy war in Ukraine, where it's gotten so bad that you've got British spy planes, and this was admitted by the Washington Post and others, on the border, in the sky off of Russia, and Russia, thinking it was not British planes, fired at the plane, shot missiles at this plane, and luckily missed twice. And if they had hit this British spy plane, who knows where we'd be now? Who knows what the next move would have been? And to be on the cusp of nuclear annihilation like this, and both of the so-called legitimate options, the two-party system that's actually won, both of them pushing for basically more, it's just horrific. It's just sad. It's a waning empire that is grasping at straws.
No, I agree with you 100%. And especially when it comes to Gaza, all of a sudden, a lot of the people that were pro-Palestine just instantly jumped on board with Kamala Harris as if she doesn't have the same policies as Joe Biden does when it comes to that particular issue. So even in the speech that she gave recently, what did she say? The same thing that Joe Biden has been saying. She said that Israel has a right to defend itself, and that she has unwavering support for Israel, which means she will continue to give Israel weapons, which means that America will continue to be Israel's bitch or whatever. The other thing, too, is that she takes AIPAC money. So I'm asking people online, I'm like, wait a minute. So now all of a sudden, genocide is not the red line because the Democratic Party put a female who's a woman of color in front of you. Now all of a sudden, you're willing to waver on genocide. And this just goes to show you, Lee, just how desperate people are for some type of a hero. And I continue to tell people nobody is coming to save you and that we have to save ourselves. But that just baffles my mind how all of a sudden genocide is not a red line anymore.
Yeah, really well said. I've been saying recently that I have two of my biggest red lines. I might have a few more, but two of my biggest red lines are: if you support this ongoing genocide by Israel against Gaza, against Palestinians, and I don't know if it matters to people, but I'm Jewish, and guess what? You can be an anti-Zionist Jew, and that is a thing. There are millions of us around the world, and in fact, there are more Zionist Christians in America than there are Jews in the world. For those, Israel has done a lot of work to try and make people conflate Zionism with Judaism, act like they're the same thing, and they are not. But I'd say that's one red line I have. And one of the biggest other ones is you've got to actually be doing something about climate crisis in some regard. And the Biden administration, this is reported by Reuters, so this is not just, some kind of lunatic reporting this, that Biden administration has pumped more oil and opened more land for drilling than the Trump administration did. The Biden administration has also increased sanctions, which are, it's a nice word, it's a nice cuddly word for economic war, on other countries more than even the Trump administration did. So much so that according to even the Washington Post, we are now at war, economic war and other, with 1/3 of the world. The U.S. is at war with 1/3 of the world in one way or another. And that's being done by both Republicans and Democrats. They all support 90% of the core issues of this country. And instead, they've done a great job of getting us to fight each other rather than uniting as a working class against the ruling elite. So much of the propaganda they spit out is designed to get us to hate each other rather than going at the actual cause of our problems, which is the ruling elite, the sociopaths at the top of the system. And it's amazing to see all the infighting of the working class. I mean, it's just, it takes a lot of propaganda, but it's been successful.
100%. And that brings me to Israel. So it's really interesting that Netanyahu was able to just come into this country to speak to Congress. This guy who's murdered.
Sabby, I gotta correct you. He didn't just come to this country. He's American. He grew up here, and so this is his country. So.
There's that too. But no, according to him, he's indigenous to the land. But we get into that another time. But anyway, he walks into Congress after he's murdered all these people, and to see all these congressmen stand up and clap for him, and some of the things that he said about the Palestinian people and the things that he said about the protesters, no pushback, standing ovations. It is utterly disgusting. And for me, what that told me, the way that he was coming after the protesters, is that we really got under his skin. We really got to him to the point where he felt like he had to address it, because the reality is around the world, Israel is losing support. I just read something the other day that now Canada is calling for a ceasefire. The UK made a statement recently saying that if Netanyahu steps foot in the UK, he would be arrested. Like other countries. Yeah,
the UK is not protesting or standing up against the ICC arrest warrant, which is pretty incredible.
Nope. No, like other countries are turning against him. And these are other countries in the West that are turning against him. And the U.S. government is still just like, oh, we got to protect Israel. No, we don't. And I want to get your opinion about what do you think is going to happen going forward, because I predicted they would drag this out through the elections, that this would not be resolved before November, because I feel like the Biden administration was kind of holding on to this as a push for people to come out and support them instead of Donald Trump. And they'll say, oh, well, we'll be less genocidal than Donald Trump will be or whatever. But genocide is genocide. But what do you think is going to happen to Israel? Because now they're closely raging a war with Hezbollah, which they know they cannot beat. I just saw a statement from Turkey's leader, and he just said that if we have to go to war with Israel, we will. He's making a statement against Israel now. Iran obviously has been making statements against Israel and is not afraid to fight Israel if need be. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, Israel as an apartheid oppressive regime is in a catch-22, especially Netanyahu himself. But he views it as an existential threat to himself to not have a larger war. He wants a larger war, but he also is well aware that if they go full on at Iran and perhaps even Hezbollah, Israel's not actually equipped to deal with them. Yeah, they have nuclear bombs, but other than nuking the whole region, I mean, they'd get hit with nuclear bombs if they used them. Other than nuking the whole region, they do not have the ability to likely to actually beat Hezbollah and Iran. I mean, definitely not Iran. Iran, many people don't understand what happened with the 300 projectiles that were shot by Iran at the Iron Dome. Now, obviously, Iran only did that as a response to having many of their diplomats murdered, assassinated by Israel as their consulate was bombed. So then Iran responded with the 300, many were drones, some were missiles. But what people don't seem to understand is 86% now, the IDF says, of those were shot down. But of the 14% that were not shot down, that was the actual ones that Iran wanted to get through, the hypersonic missiles. All of those got through. So Iran proved that they're with 4 countries trying to shoot all these things down, Iran can actually get through the Iron Dome. So Israel is not protected. They are actually fully open to Iranian strikes. And yet Netanyahu needs more war. He needs the U.S. to get fully, and the U.S. is obviously hyper involved, but fully involved with war with Iran, or at least war with Lebanon, that in order for Netanyahu to not get kicked out of his office, but also perhaps to not end up in jail. Now, this doesn't mean that Israelis are opposed to continuing the genocide. Something like 90% of Israelis want the genocide in Gaza to continue, but a large percentage of them want Netanyahu out of office. So we have many U.S. officials who are trying to shift the onus onto Netanyahu. Man, Netanyahu is screwed up. Again, bad apple, right? It's like the guy that killed Sonia Massie. It's a bad apple who's committing this genocide. But in fact, the U.S. and most Israelis want the actual ethnic cleansing, the genocide going on in Gaza to continue. They just don't want Netanyahu in office. So there is reports that Netanyahu, during his meetings here in the U.S., he was able to get approval from the U.S. for a larger war with Hezbollah, with Lebanon. So that very well may happen. And again, he views that as something that he needs to protect Israel. But the U.S. will never, Israel and the U.S. are part of the U.S. empire, and the U.S. is not going. They may withhold a shipment of missiles here or build a ridiculous fake pier that they've now gotten rid of there, but they're not actually going to back off of helping Israel with this genocide at any time.
Do you think it'll get to the point where they send U.S. troops to help Israel?
I think they very much are fighting that. I mean, certainly if they were to do that, they'd probably wait till after the election. Although, for those who care, there actually are U.S. troops in Israel facilitating this genocide. They're just not fighting in Gaza. But even the New York Times has said the CIA is helping Israel to assassinate Palestinians. There's just many ways that the U.S. troops are involved. Also, the pier had U.S. troops on it. So apparently boots on the ground is different from flip-flops in the sand, I guess. I don't know.
It's an absolute mess. Why do you think some people are hesitant to, and this is what I said to people about that uncommitted campaign. I said, okay, it's a good idea to withhold your vote, but I do feel like Rashida Tlaib should have been ushering those voters to support the candidates that are pro-Palestine, that are against this war, that are against genocide, etc. And of course, there was no push for that. So it's just this uncommitted vote, which was under Joe Biden and is now under Kamala Harris, according to that uncommitted movement. But to me, I'm like, if you're serious, why don't you just vote for the people who are for that? Why do you think more people are hesitant to do that?
Well, I mean, for me, it has to do with more than just Gaza. It has to do with not being for this horrific military state. But as to why there's not getting more support, I mean, some of it has to do with money. There's just so much money that floods in to those who are for Israel, and the money floods against anyone who's pro-Palestine. That's by design. That's how our system is. Another way our system is rigged is, money's about half the rigging. You look at the rigging of primaries and et cetera. So much of it has to do with just money and data. The DNC controls all the data, so they won't give the data to anyone who's pro-Palestine. I mean, it's just so many levels of rigging that goes on in these systems.
Yeah, it's absolutely a mess, because I just feel like, and I want to get your opinion about the third party independent candidates as well, because I do feel like a couple of months ago, there was a big, or seemed like more of a bigger movement towards that, where people were like, yeah, there was a lot more momentum. I felt like there was a lot more energy around it. As we get closer to November, especially now that Kamala Harris has been announced as the nominee for the Democratic Party, I'm noticing even someone like RFK Jr., who, by the way, folks, is horrible on Israel and Gaza as well. Even he is now losing support now that Kamala Harris has been announced. What do you think is happening there?
I mean, there's always an excitement and a fresh face. So that's some of it. Many believe these polls are going to even out. But yeah, some people, I guess, they're excited about third parties until push comes to shove. I mean, there's also just immense propaganda to tell you that third parties don't matter, to tell you that you have to vote blue no matter who, because clearly anything that rhymes must be true. So there's just there's so much effort to make you think third parties are meaningless. And I think they can have a very important impact, especially on the ideals, the points that are put forward. Many of the things that have been stolen by Democrats and then watered down started in the Green Party. So yeah, I think in terms of ideas, I think they're very important, and speaking of, earlier we were making fun of a female face to genocide. Guess what? There's females running who are not a face to genocide, like Jill Stein and Claudia de la Cruz. But God forbid we ever talk about anything outside of the two garbage, capitalist, exploitative, disgusting parties.
Right. They did this in 2016 too. They said that if you were against Hillary Clinton, that you were misogynistic. And I'm like, there are other women running as well. But,
right.
They know what they're doing when they make that type of statement.
Yeah. Also, I'm the campaign manager for a rock that I found in my yard. If anyone wants to check that out, running for president, yardrock2024.com. And a rock in the Oval Office would be so much better. I am sorry. I am sorry. I got to run, Sabby, but I really.
Yes, past time.
I really do love talking to you. And if people want to check out my live streams, 4 days a week on YouTube and Rumble.
All right, Lee. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.